If you're not making any sales, you don't have a business, you practically have a hobby.
The website market and anything inside of digital is hyper saturated at this point.
Yeah.
This is where AI is right now. It's a space to explore and really just like learn as much as you possibly can around it. Because once we understand it, we'll be able to be more effective in it.
Welcome back to yet another episode of the Truth Talk podcast. My name is Larry Jimu, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Melsoft Academy. Today, I'm joined by a very, very special guest. His name is Darren, and for those you that don't know, Darren was my mentor when we launched Melsoft Academy. We'll go every single week, would meet at either Bootleggers or any coffee shop in Joburg, and he would mentor me eventually to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to launch Mousesoft Academy. So without Darren, there would be no Mousesoft Academy. And it's my great honor to have you on the show today, Darren.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you on the show, Larry. Your words are too kind. Thank you.
Awesome. So just a brief intro for those that don't know anything about you yet.
Cool. Yeah. So, quick intro around me is I'm Darren Mansour. I'm the founder of a digital agency called So Interactive. Been running it for around 18 years now, and yeah, I've got a strong hand in business operations, design, and digital leadership, and that's really where a lot of my business grows in that space. And yeah, and just looking forward to joining this podcast and sharing some of those insights.
Awesome. So you're a very, very successful owner of a digital agency. And a lot of people that listen to this podcast are students of Mousesoft Academy. So these are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students that really want to be exactly where you want to be. Most students come and say, oh, I'm learning this software thing or this AI thing so that one day I can start my own agency. So it's really good to have you, really great to have you. For anyone who's listening to this or watching this, just copy paste everything that Darren says. I promise you it's gonna work. Everything is gonna work. So yeah, talk us through your journey of starting So Interactive.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, for those that you don't know, is that So Interactive is a digital first agency. We started out around 2007. And one of the main things is that we saw a big gap in the market in South Africa. And at the time, websites were mostly and purely functional. It was a means to an end. Everyone needed one, very brochure style type of operations. And it was the last point in the process after your branding was done. Everyone needed a website. And that's just kind of where we saw that gap, is that it wasn't just about a website, but how do we turn websites into a functional business tool that can aid in growing businesses, etc. And that was kind of where So Interactive stepped in. We saw we could create way more immersive experiences that would engage users and build in that brand experience, not just as a entry point, but as a whole holistic journey. And I really wanted to change that. I wanted to change that narrative that was having what we heard in the rooms of what the website's use was and how we could benefit that. So that's kind of where the vision started as a design and build company. And we kind of went on this journey of how do we bring interactive experience into place. Agencies worldwide, such as Fantasy Interactive, and they're now called Fantasy, were a big inspiration for me. And there were plenty of agencies doing a lot of flash work. For those of you who don't know, it was an integrated design system that allowed for interactive experiences. And we really saw that as a benefit to the market and how we can engage in that. And So Interactive was born. I mean, it helped brands connect with their audiences in a more meaningful way that aligned to brand objectives and then later into marketing.
Where did the name come from?
Good question. Through multiple iterations of names and from quirkiness to where we landed, um, the whole point of the word interactive is what resonated with me the most. And trying to find ways to bring that to light in a simplified way, to say the name needs to kind of cover what it is that we do. And yeah, at the time, I mean, there was only the best way to explain that was through, well, it's so interactive, and that's what we do. And in many conversations, I still hear it in briefs many times, is that we're looking for an experience that is so interactive. And yeah, it's nice to hear our name be part of sentences and structures and briefs. And I think yeah, a lot of people are looking for an interactive experience, and that's kind of where the name generated from. Is that that's what we were building, and that's what So Interactive was about.
So, in terms of actually starting the business and launching it, what sort of challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of challenges that came into place, and and when we started the business, I started there was a silent partner in the business originally. When we kicked off in 2007, that kind of was more mentorship and guiding and navigating the area of operations more than anything, and just understanding the scope of that. But the challenges is that So Interactive started out as a solo business. It was myself for the first year growing something off a skill set that I had, and that skill set was design as the main area, and design in websites was a big part of that. So our biggest challenge was that being a solo business at the time, I knew what the end goal was or where we wanted to go, but initially it was organic growth that I had to get to where I was going. And I would say that was one of the biggest challenges that I found, is that doing everything yourself, understanding everything around business, in the first year to 2 years, takes quite a bit out of you. So although you're passionate about design and you're passionate about creating websites at the time, it was very much not just about that. It was also around finding the business, getting the business, delivering on the business, dealing with clients at multiple levels. And those challenges I faced within the first year quite extensively. And from that, it kind of set the bar for what it took to get the business off the ground to where it was going. And those challenges are challenges that I've grown with. So, for instance, when we got our first hire, the hire was put in place so that I could focus more on business development, and it was quite a hard thing to move away from. Well, I love doing the work, and I love delivering on websites and engagements, but suddenly there was someone needed to drive the business forward while the work was being done. And just that mindset was a big shift for me. So I found that challenging. I found that now suddenly I wasn't doing the work. I needed to focus on another side of the business. But that ultimately, that challenge turned into a solution, is that I saw where the benefit lay in scaling up the business. And I use the word scaling quite loosely because it was a slow growth journey. But ultimately getting that first hire, the second hires, etc. Those were, I'd say, my first early day challenges, was just breaking away from doing and focusing more on growing. And yeah, I would say that as a main challenge, that would be a core challenge. And then just navigating the challenges of business, like whether it's legal documentation or whether it's understanding accounting practices. I think those things come with time, but you learn as you go. And that's something that is a challenge in the beginning, becomes like second nature, as you're growing your business. But ideally, I would say like the biggest challenge for me was breaking away from the actual work, the doing of the work, and focusing on growing the business side of So Interactive in the early stages.
That's very interesting. And you don't have a computer science or traditional tech degree, do you?
No, so I came from well, at least the diploma that I did was an advertising and design diploma. That is my core background, was design. At the time, websites and web design and development, and that wasn't as big as where it was, 5 years down the line from when I finished. So a lot of my focus was around traditional advertising and design, but my passion lay inside of interaction design and web design. So I explored that further, once I'd finished my studies. But I didn't have an official degree inside of web design or in UX or UI design. It kind of I grew that through self study, and through the projects that we took on, and learning from other companies I worked from as well. But no actual besides my diploma in advertising and design, no engineering degree or anything along those lines.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. So, in your experience now, what would you say are some of the most important skills that someone who's considering to start an agency needs to have?
Yeah, it's a great question because I mean we speak about skills in as hard skills, skills that we can kind of get an outcome on. And I think when it comes to business, we all start somewhere. So I mean, if you take myself as a good example, the reason I could start a business is because my skill was needed. Websites were needed, design was needed, building the websites was needed as well. And I think that was what I had to offer, and that was the deliverable around it. And that's kind of where the thought of let's run a business came from, or start a business. But then the bigger area of that is that the experience that you need is built on my key pillars, and that is business and strategy is really critical. Thinking beyond the work itself, and I think that is our number one push. Is that you've got a service, or you've got a product, and you want to offer that product. But how does that product enter the market? How do we acquire clients for the market? How do we manage projects so that it's profitable around the market that we're entering into? So business and strategy is really critical to the success of what you're doing inside of your business. And then how do we translate that creative work or that web work or strategy work into something that solves problems? And I think when we bring those two together, we start building something really worth growing. Technical and creative skills inside of our industry was really strong. I mean, we needed it. I mean, that was the end result of us doing what we're doing. But that's still a key skill set. But it's not to say that because you don't have development skills, you can't start a business in uh, a dev company. You're going to need someone to do the work, and you're going to have to hire up sooner than maybe if you started it yourself. But technical and creative skills inside of a digital agency is important, and it does give you the upper hand once you have those skills at hand. And then those soft skills and leadership. I think we underestimate, or it's overlooked quite a bit around the leadership, because communication is critical. Problem solving is like a huge one as well, in that leadership ability. So once you start hiring a team, you've got to be able to communicate to that team and get the most out of that team, guide the teams, grow the team, manage the client's expectation around that, and ensuring those projects run smoothly. And this is where we see a lot of agencies and that sometimes fall short, is that they've got amazing, incredible technical and creative skills, but what lacks maybe is around business strategy and soft skills and leadership. And that's difficult at times, because you'll either stay quite nimble and small, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to grow an agency and grow bigger, that requirement innately has to happen. So we've got to apply more leadership skills and more strategic skills. So I would say those three main areas are skills that need to be grown: business and strategy, technical and creative skills, and then your soft skills and leadership. As you're growing the business.
Yeah, that's a lot of value right there. I also just realized the importance of strategy, because I thought that as an entrepreneur, all you need is hustle and work ethic, and you work from 9 to 9, 6 days a week with no rest. But the importance of strategy is really, really underestimated. And I found out the hard way after toiling for years. So for you and for So Interactive, what sort of strategy works for you, and not just for you, but for digital agencies? What how can someone who's 19 years old apply a business strategy to an agency? How can they navigate that?
So, so yeah, my biggest thing around strategy is taking the hard knocks and learning from them, and that was my education platform for business strategy. But what I did go through processes inside the business that didn't work, and how did we optimize those processes. And that business strategy came to, if you don't have something to measure against, it's very difficult to define a roadmap or path to achieve those results. And many times we sit down and we go, right, what do I want to do? What is the strategy that I'm doing? Or who are we as a business? Or what's my positioning on my business? And that's all good and well. But unless we know where we're going, it's very difficult to start with the beginning point. And I think that is when we're looking at a strategy as a deliverable inside of your business. The first place to start is, what is the end goal? What is the key performance indicators that we're trying to drive? Those KPIs that set us apart, those KPIs that are going to be measurable, and then how do we get there? So this is for any strategy, whether it's a marketing strat, a business strat. So for us, like big pointers, and anyone else that's going out there, is understanding the type of client that you want to approach. What size is the client? What is the type of work that you want to take on? Um, Understanding who you would be speaking to. Is it a marketing manager? Is it a founder? Are you working with startups? Are you working with an enterprise business? Understanding the core value of what it is that you want to sell, or who you want to sell to, is the first step in understanding, right, that's my market, and that's the level of business I want to build. Then moving through a sales and performance tracking KPI. So what does sales performance look like inside of the business? So am I looking to drive up 100 million in business, or am I looking to drive up, I can only accommodate for a million rand in business? So that's my starting point. And when we set these goals, we don't set them unachievable goals. We always setting them with achievable, realistic goal setting to ensure that we're incrementally growing the business, and we're not setting ourselves up for failure. So sales and performance is critical, and we base that on invoice revenue. And then the other big thing, which a lot of people, maybe you hear on, other podcasts and that you hear of, is your funnel size and lead generation. And that for us is really important as well. So if I choose a market, or I choose a client type, how many of those size businesses can I get through the funnel? And what am I tying that back to? Am I tying it back to how much project value sits in that funnel? So if the project for a website is worth X amount, how many of those projects do I need to get into my funnel to hopefully close 10% of them or 15% of them? And using these types of metrics really help start segmenting what it is that I need to do, and when my red flags come up as well. I'm going to, if you don't mind, just indulge me on some of these key points as I'm going through them. But your lead generation is critical to drive up your sales performance. And that is where we sit and go, when the funnel dries up and we say, right, we need, I'm going to use 10 million rand worth of business in our sales funnel at any given point, any month, so we know there's a closing value to do on that business, is really critical to close in that business. And if your conversion rate is, well, for every 10% or 15% or 50% of your funnel, there's something to convert. And that's a big factor to also look at, right, well, how are we going to fill up that funnel size? And that ties back to the strategy. Then we would look at other KPIs. I'll quickly run through them. So like our conversion ratio. So if we're sitting at a conversion ratio of only 10% or 25% on all leads in our funnel, that's also going to inform how many leads do we get in the funnel. So, or how much business do we need to get through the funnel in order for it to convert against what our sales KPI is. And we keep on doing this. And then we go through our cash flow management, which is a different KPI, but cash flow is going to keep the business alive. And if we don't have cash flow, the business dies. So this is another factor of how do we strategically plan for cash flow management. It's a critical KPI, because without it, you die as a business, and with it, you thrive. So it's really important to understand, when is the cash flow limit going to be hit, and if it is going to be hit, what is the risk management that we put in place on cash flow management. Now, cash flow management forms part, in my mind, even though it's financial strategy, it still forms part of your business strat, because the cash flow is what's feeding the business, paying salaries, paying suppliers, making sure the business can run for another month, etc., or 3 months thereafter. So understanding how this is all tying together all sits with performance of a business to last longer. And then we would look at other aspects of the business as well. Is, for instance, Net Promoter Score is a framework. If you're familiar with it, it's a scoring from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. That is, how willing is your clients to promote you to to other people. And we use it as part of like our review framework, but it also informs our business strategy as well. So these are key things that are critical to how we would approach business strategy, or how you could approach business strategy, is looking at the end result and then working backwards from there and building a roadmap to that end result. And that is where we can start getting really detailed, because you may be a business that only needs 10 clients, and then you are very much focusing on a smaller scale business, but is able to land 10 clients that are high revenue generating for your business. Or you might be a volumes based business that you need 1,000 clients in order for you to see revenue at the end of that. And it's a very different sales strategy, and each one requires its own dynamics. But in essence, for us, it really sits, that's where business strategy sits for us. Now, a lot of this is very sales orientated, but for where I sit today is that sales is the lifeblood of our agency. If we can't convert and we can't create opportunity out there, I hate to say the word again, but we die as an agency. So it's
Yeah.
really important that we can have the best operations, the best procedures, best of everything. But if we don't have anything funneling inwards, we kind of at the road to the end. And that's kind of why I'm hitting harder on sales, funnel size, lead generation, cash flow management, because these are critical points inside of a business. I can spend a year on a business plan, which is important on some level. But then if I start the business and I still don't know how to drive up my sales performance and get that funnel full, that business plan has no value to add because it can't be implemented. This is just the way I've approached it, because I know where the lifeblood sits on any service-based business, and that's kind of a big thing for us. So yeah, I hope I answered the question. But ultimately,
Yeah.
this is where we start looking, and that's why our business strategies are all based on these key indicators to determine what does that runway look like, how we can keep on growing, where are we lacking, where can we improve, and building up and learning and building and learning. So if we don't close any business for a month, why? And asking those hard questions: how can we improve? How can we better? So that's really key when it comes down to our business strategy inside of our agency.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of very useful nuggets in that. And what I really like is that sales is the lifeblood of any business. If you're not making any sales, you don't have a business, you practically have a hobby. And until a sale takes place in any business, that's when you've actually started being in business. So, how
Mm.
would someone who is a beginner, who's just starting out with no resources to advertise or anything, how can they make their first sale? What sort of things can they try out to get that first money in the bank?
Yeah, so it's gonna be different for everyone. But if we had to take my scenario where it's a low operational cost that is in place, and it's just you, and you're able to deliver on that work, and that's where you're starting, the best place to first aim your target is: who is the type of client that you want to bring in, and what is the impact of that client going to be on your future business. Now, in a very micro space, if we say, right, well, so I was freelancing a bit in the beginning before I started the business. So I already had some key clients that I wanted to scale up into the business and really like get them to use more of the services. However, though, if we're looking at, you want to approach an industry in the food and beverage market or in the restaurant space, and that's your first point of call, but you know it's going to be difficult to break through. Potentially, you need to look at, well, are you going to do, and I hate to say the word, but a bit of spec work in order for you to build a rapport in the market and build your portfolio under your business name, in order for it to start building up some proof of work that you've done when you pitch to another client or present to another client, or
What's
work with,
what's spec work?
so doing the work at no cost.
Okay.
So very low, especially when you're just yourself, there's a potential that you can build up a bit of a profile, and you could start doing some work for either at no cost, or work that would be a low entry level piece of business. Um, now, Now, in most cases, saying what I'm saying goes against what I say in my everyday, is that you shouldn't be pitching your work at no cost. But I think we also need to be realistic in starting a business, and depending on the size of that business, if you're looking for a slow start or an organic growth start in your business, you might have to start smaller before you have the clout to say, I'm doing X or I'm doing Y. So we must always remember is that this is not about your end, this is not about your starting goal, it's about your end goal. So finding that client and really, really finding them, speaking to families, speaking to people you may know, finding someone that maybe has an opportunity that didn't have the budget to do a project. How can you first help them? Are they willing to pay for that help? And if not, is it worth your while to assist that business to get your feet off the ground? And I think sometimes those approaches are possible if you're starting out. You mentioned the age 19. You're very young. You're just starting out. So in order for you to be taken seriously, having a portfolio or something that represents the work that you're doing is as critical as anything else, because words on paper are not necessarily, that's only one start of the process. Honestly, I've never started, when I started So Interactive, every client was a paying client. However, though, I was already in the industry for 5 years doing work with working for other agencies at the time. So my portfolio was already vastly large by the time I started the business, and I had experience in different industries as well. So sometimes starting young is great and it gets your entrepreneurship going. But I would aid is that having career experience and learning from good people will help almost fast track to get further, because you've got experience and you've got a bit of working experience behind you that can kind of push you forward, because you maybe have no know-how, and you've got a bit of a portfolio behind you that you could maybe use, or you could use to your advantage to say that I've worked in the following industries, or and these types of things could be really beneficial when you're starting a business. And I would say that I started, I mean, a lot more people are starting a lot younger and getting into entrepreneurship, but I started my business, I think I was 26 or 27 at the time. And but I had started that business with a lot of experience that I had in the market, and I think it definitely aided in my thinking how to approach certain subjects inside of digital, what worked and what didn't work. So I learned a lot from what wasn't working in that space and how I could use that to my benefit of improving the benchmarks inside the space as well. But yeah, just going back, sort of just circle back to the conversation around getting that first client. I think there's a lot of lesson to be learned by starting small and building up over time. If you're financially backed and you can hire a team and you can get really great talent into your business soon and early, that's also a good way to fast track. But if you are starting out as a one man or one person show, that is kind of where a good place to start and build up rapport over time. So that's my suggestion. And then the other route is to see, is there any avenues that you may have that you could reach out to other companies. So maybe you know somebody, and as I said earlier, friends, family, referrals, etc., that are looking for your service, and start there, but start small, and really build it up over time, so you can focus on the craft of creating something great, and then use that as leverage.
Fantastic. Very fantastic work. You mentioned a lot of mistakes that juniors or people that are just starting out in the industry make. Um, Two of them. The first one is impatience, where they want to start that business at 19 or 20 years old when they don't have much experience. And that ultimately ends up being expensive for them because they make mistakes that they could have easily avoided if they had picked up some experience. And then another mistake that you mentioned is that when juniors overcharge or charge too much when they're still starting out, they actually end up missing out on building a strong portfolio, because at the beginning no one knows about you, you don't have any track record, and you must be so focused on building a portfolio, which is some
Mm.
really really great advice. What are other mistakes that you see people that are building agencies make early on?
Mm. So I can touch on a couple of things here that are very applicable, and whether they're mistakes or whether they are just challenges that you would face as you're presenting your business and that. I think one of the biggest challenges, and yet it's essential, is obviously is how we create opportunity inside of any business that we are offering. And some common areas of mistake is, one of the first ones is selling a service instead of a solution. And obviously, this is what happens often. Even myself, when we started out, it was still very much trying to gain the business, trying to build up rapport inside of the market. And it was the new clients that didn't know who we were and how we approached that. And it very much became because that's what people were asking for. They were asking for a website, as an example, and you sold them a website at times. And that is one of the, if I could say that as a mistake, because that fundamentally shifted how we work today, is that we need to focus on building solutions for clients. We need to focus less on what we do and more on how it benefits and solves the client's problem. And
Mhm.
this is where we start speaking strategically and being a partner to clients. So focusing on business impact. So by doing X, what is the outcome? By doing Y, what is the outcome? And when we start looking at things like that, we start to build up more resonance. So we want to focus on, we don't build websites, we help you convert your clients or your potential clients into business. Or we don't do logos. We focus on building a brand language on what we for your business that's able to communicate your work easily to your clients. So, like as an example, so changing that thing of, I just do logo design or I just do website design, and that's what I'm offering you. You want a website, I'll give you a website. And to be very honest, let's get real. The website market and anything inside of digital is hyper saturated at this point.
Yeah.
Anyone getting into digital right now, is you really got to be a standout business to make an impact. And not to say that there's not work available, but every all the prices and marketing is being pushed down. So what value can you bring to my business that's going to actually convert into somewhat of a result? And again, like, what is that KPI that we're measuring against? Also, not understanding the client needs. So jumping too quickly into the work without understanding what that need is. And what you really need to make sure of is listen more, talk less, and finding how to understand the business problem so that you understand it. So when you're delivering on something, you're delivering impact again. And this is very much what we're doing in our current business till today, is that we want to make sure we're asking the right questions. And that doesn't, I'm not always in a client meeting. There's a lot of my team in that are trained up in this, and it's very much around, how do we ask better questions so that we can identify challenges inside of those briefs or a project. So that's another thing. Just understanding the client's business need before you're putting forward what the deliverable is. Like, ignore that. I don't want to say ignore the technical detail, but it's not so much about what program it's developed in. It's what the program's language that you're developing that's going to create an outcome for your user. And it sounds very logical. Like, yes, of course, that's what I'm doing. But that's where, as developers, designers, etc., the outcome is, well, I'm going to design this logo for you. I'm going to create this website for you, and we're going to do
Yeah.
it in WordPress. And WordPress is amazing, but it actually doesn't matter. What's amazing is the outcome of the final product and how it benefits your business. So, like, those are big things that are, as I say, they're not mistakes. They're just approach to how do you approach your client with a little bit more empathy and finding and understanding better, because that is what matters.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the two more that I could touch on as well is pricing is really important as well, and I think that's a big factor. Is, how do you price right? How do you make sure you are adding value to your pricing, not underselling yourself, and making sure that it fits inside the market space. That's really understanding yourself as a business owner, and what value you're giving to your clients is really critical. And lastly, choosing the wrong clients. I think I'm going to go back on what I mentioned about doing spec work and starting small in that, yes, you might end up with a client that might not be the best client for you, and that's not ideal. But ultimately, the wrong client is, don't say yes to every client that comes in just because you need the business. And it's a feast or famine type of business industry. This is that sometimes you do end up taking on a client because your business needs to be charged up again and you need to bring cash flow up. But in most cases, say more no's and make sure you're choosing the right clients. So that's really critical, because if you choose an industry that's not the industry you see yourself being in. So if you want to be in the real estate business, and real estate, that's where you want to focus your time, but you're taking on all food and beverage type of clients, that's what your portfolio is going to kind of end up in, and then maybe you won't be able to land that client. So make sure you know who your client is and make the decisions based on how can you benefit this client, how can you bring more impact for this client. And once you start doing that, you already start pushing into where your leads and qualifying your leads more effectively as well. So those are a couple of things that I would say are challenges that could kind of be looked at mistakes, but I think they're learnings. They're learnings from when you try it and you look at it and you go, oh, this is not right. How do we improve in it? This could be great ways. And we improve that by being better storytellers, like making sure when you stand up and you pitch your work and you're putting it out there, focus on the business problem and illustrate your opportunity in what your offer is, and how do you offer the client something that can really be standout compared to the other three agencies that are maybe presenting the same work. Refine your processes. Make sure that what processes are you implementing in order to qualify those clients. So are you implementing maybe a discovery call for 15 minutes to understand if the client is actually a client you want to work with or not? What is your next steps after that discovery call? All of these things take time. And if time's an asset to what we do, then how do you maximize that time to get the most out of where you spend it? And these types of steps are going to help you, get the right clients, ask the right questions, learn how to deal with uh, the processes of each step of the way to get the best out of your clients as well, and offer the best that you can do for your clients.
Great stuff. Really, really great stuff. Speaking about pricing, which I think is a very tricky issue for people that are just starting out, they don't know what to charge, and some of them take on the spec work for long, long periods of time. How do you charge for your services? How do you make sure that you're getting a lot and you're actually feasting from your services and not,
Yeah.
being in famine?
Yeah, I think this is a tough question, and I'll tell you why. Is because my pricing strategy over someone else's pricing strategy is quite different. And in our market, if you're working with large to enterprise clients, procurement sometimes controls a lot of how the pricing structure needs to come through. And I'll open up the floor on this around this. Is that when you look at comparing apples with apples in a procurement department, they might say, we want everything in hourly billing. We need to know each line item needs to be X, Y, and Z, and you need to supply your proposal against this type of structure. So now you might have a very particular way of costing, but now suddenly to match that RFP, which is a request for a proposal, for those that don't know, you might need to change your billing structure to accommodate an hourly based billing. And for us, hourly based billing is the worst way to bill, in our opinion, in our business, and that because it creates a limitation in how we bill, and it's very difficult for us to offer value to a client on hourly based billing. So there are going to be situations where you price in your work against a certain request for proposal, or maybe a client expects a certain costing matrix to help them decide on what's the best costing structure. These are things that are going to happen in the market, regardless whether you like it or not. It is happening. And it's up to you again to decide, do I want this type of client or don't I want it? Because I charge X and they're doing it Y. And those are your decisions. I mean, those are your decisions as a business owner. But what's really key here is just knowing that it does vary. I don't think there's any set path. And as much as I can sit here and go, there's hourly billing and there's value-based billing and there's project-based billing, everyone's different, and you can kind of use a hybrid of each one. So for our business, anything on a retainer, or anything on work that we're doing is hourly based, and that is because it's very specific block book time that is required for an ongoing basis. And where that works really well for us is in if you're doing SEO marketing, where there's a required amount of backlog jobs that need to be delivered on within a month period, and we can do that running hourly billing. Or if you're a social media client and you're looking for someone to generate content for you, and we want to do X amount of time on that content, I can time base that content as well. So that's very much hourly based billing in that space. But when it comes to us costing our projects on project based work, whether that's a UX or UI project, or we're looking at a larger scale campaign in that, we generally cost out our projects on sprint based costing models. And it's our unique way of costing and costing out the project, but it gives the client the most amount of value because it's a dedicated team allocated to your business that runs on a sprint basis, and we work more collaboratively with our clients. So the value at the end of each sprint or at the end of each cycle is a lot more than being too granular with project based work. So that's our way and our way of approaching pricing. Now, I've worked through pricing strategies year on year because it is something that either, well, at least in a small micro business like ourselves, is something that might need to be adapted. It does it work? Doesn't it work? How does it impact on our sales ratios when we're closing business? Do clients understand the sprint model? Do we need to educate more? So we've built up a very robust sprint system, and it's filtered into everything that we do. And that is kind of where we cost it out, is because we're scaling up teams according to that sprint. And we've taken this from development industry. We saw how well sprints work, and we've pulled this through into all our agile practices inside of our business. So from a pricing point of view, you can decide how you want to price. If you're pricing per hour, and I think in the beginning stages of any business, pricing per hour is the easiest way to price the service to the client, because you can say, well, this project's taking me 8 hours to do. I'm charging the client 8 hours of time, and you can put that forward to the client. So from an easy point of view, determine what your hourly rate is, or what you mark that hourly rate up, and bill that to the client or quote the client on an hourly base fee. And then as you get more skilled with pricing and pricing strategies and seeing how your market reacts, you can start maybe evolving that into more structured or unique pricing opportunities, like ourselves that do sprint-based pricing, but we do very much understand the market. Been in the business for 18 years, and I understand where reaction lies over where no reaction is. And I think that is a push and pull type of negotiation to determine what's the right pricing strategy for you and your clients to ensure that you can get the business that's mutually beneficial to them and it's mutually beneficial to your agency. So again, this is a key thing, and I think a missing point here, and I think goes back to the challenges that we see in digital agency as well, is that a non-profitable project you're failing your own agency as well at times, because if you can't get your cash flow out of a project, you will burn all of that profit or margin inside of your project, which in aid would make it difficult for you to run your agency. So it's beneficial for you to be profitable on the project or have margin on the project that's good for you, and it's mutually beneficial to your clients as well. So it's always a push and pull type of thing, and it is negotiation that sits in place. So I would like to say today is that pricing is very much subjective to you as a person and how you want to price and what works for your business. So you got to decide that and test different pricing structures of what works as well, in order for you to get the best results for your client. I think that's my take on it based on the experience that we've seen over the last 18 years of pricing.
Yeah, extremely insightful. Extremely insightful. I've also dabbled with different methods of pricing, and I've always found that hourly rate billing is always the least effective for
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
because you're essentially being punished for doing a job quickly, and you're
exactly.
incentivized for spending more time on solving a problem. So I've never really liked it. But then you also mentioned something very, 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 very useful, where you said that you started off as the solo operator of the business, and then as you grew, you had to start letting go of the operations or the delivery of the service itself.
Mm,
And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, where they are the great technical expert. No one does the job better than them. And it's very difficult for them to give other people that responsibility. So, how
mm,
did you let go of actually delivering the service? And how do you ensure that the quality matches what you would have done, even though you're not the one that's doing it anymore?
mm. Yeah, the this was so still very operational in the business. A little bit less than obviously in the beginning, but the biggest thing I had to take my foot off was doing the work. So, as a creative, as a web designer, back in the day, the passion was the work. The passion was creating the work, crafting that work, making it go live. That is where it all began. So my difficulty was letting that go and saying, right, well, I'm no longer going to design anymore, and I'm no longer going to develop web projects. And when I say develop, I mean purely web front end development, not like engineering or back end development. But ultimately, that was me letting go, and that decision probably happened around second year already into the business, because in order for us to be efficient and start growing the business, I had to let it go. It was too time consuming to be in the project than managing the project. And I needed to manage the project and get out of the project. And there's still very much as part of a lot of the time. I'm not to say that I'm completely hands off. I'm still very much in creative direction and digital direction and all of these aspects of my business. But ultimately, during that time, I had to let go of something that I really loved, and that was doing the work. And that was the reason why I shifted quite quickly into I'm no longer a designer. I am a business owner. I'm a founder, or I'm a director now. And I've got to direct and steer the ship in the direction that it needs to go. And I've got to hire up for those roles that are needed. And that, I would say, a good 5, 6 years. And as crazy as it sounds, because today you can do a lot more in 5, 6 years, but I navigated quite a bit of this hiring up, losing people, hiring up, is it the right resources, and understanding what that looks like. And I was fortunate enough, I had I wouldn't say the luxury, but I had the ability to understand where the right people were in the job and where maybe it wasn't the right person for the job. And every time I hired, I learned from that hire. So you speak about QA. What does great look like? Well, sometimes great only looks good when you know what great looks like. So I started understanding what I thought I was looking for. Maybe the first 2 or 3 or 4, 5 or 6 hires maybe wasn't the ultimate, but there was key things inside of people that we hired that I was like, this is a strong asset, and I built on that while hiring. And through people, our quality assurance got better. So through the process of hiring and putting talent in, letting them be part of our culture and learning from them along the way, we got better at what we did. And that was kind of the leverage that we've used over time, is that people are especially in the service business, the number one aspect to growth in any business that you're doing. And when they are there to perform and do what their role is, and the autonomy is left as well, we get the greatest work out from those great talents. But if we're hiring and we're micromanaging a process, we're doing it our way, or we're doing it like in a way that is what my head space is. I don't know how, if I'm explaining this correctly,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to. People need to flourish based on the skill set they have, and the training is around how culturally and how operations work. But they're there to do what needs to be done, and they need the autonomy to do that and spread their wings and thrive in that environment. So my learning from those individuals that have worked with us over all these times, and I've done a lot of hiring inside of a process, I've learned what great looks like. And I had a bar in the beginning of our agency that was maybe so high, but once we got to year 5, that bar had raised maybe 10x because I could see what impact people were adding to the agency, and that's really what drove us to where we are today, is the impact of people on me being a young business owner, learning from all different walks of life, coming through the doors of the agency, adding value, and us building on that value. So it was incremental growth of skill set of each role that we take in, because some roles I'd never hired before. I never hired a social media manager before. I used to do that myself, or never hired a copywriter before, because that was the first copywriter we had ever hired. And that process was what made our quality assurance tighter, better, more effective. So sometimes quality assurance comes from more mistakes and failures rather than from knowing exactly what you want. It's an incremental growth of, I know now what great looks like, or I know now this is the level of people that we need, or I know now that we can do analytics more effectively because that person showed us how to do it more effectively. And that's kind of cool. And sometimes you just get lucky and you find the right people that are, after many hires, and that just change the game for a business. And that change in the game for a business sets your bar higher. And that's kind of what we've progressed through, is that a lot of the vision in that is there, and I'm driving that vision, but it's the people that bring that vision to life.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. So about people, like you mentioned, that it's the people that bring the great vision to life. Another key person in this whole experience is the customer or the client,
Mhm.
who, without them there is no party at all. And how do you how do you keep the client engaged, and how do you keep the client happy? Because sometimes you might have the best technical experts in the world, but if you don't have great customer experience, you might still fail at a project.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, the business very much around a human-centric offering, building digital experiences that mattered and we could create impact. And I think that has been our main unique selling point. But more than that, it's about how do we impact the customer of the customer. So our client is our client, and we make sure that we have very much strong relationships. So I'll give you an example. I really believe in service delivery at for the client, and that relationship building is critical. So I've built a very strong client service team, and that client service team manages the client, understands the business. They're very strategic on the accounts as well that we're rolling out, and that account management team is really the relationship between the agency and the client itself. And so managing that relationship is really key for us to succeed and grow the client and help the client improve in their own business. And that has really been a big hard thing. I mean, in 2021, um, after the COVID and the craziness of COVID, we ended up with a very core team. And that core team was really driven by a client service team. And they maintained the face of the business and built the business and kept on growing the business forward because they held the relationship with the client. And there was enough trust in us and the client to continue building up the business over the next 3 to 4 years after COVID, or after that period at least. And I think that was a big thing for us, is like, how do we ensure the trust is built with the client, and ensuring that we have really long-standing client service team that can grow with our clients and add that value. So it goes back to, what's the value, what's the impact on my business, and how's it working out for the client. And if we keep on that loop cycle of, did we make an impact this month and didn't we? Okay, how do we improve? How do we improve? We start building up more and more trust. And that, so very much from traditional agency, we did adopt quite a bit of that model, is that where you have a client service team, and that client service team is the face of the business, and then everything gets fed through to the rest of the team from client service. But we've built it in that way for that purpose, is that we were very relationships focused, and we wanted to ensure that our clients and our client, whether they're in the marketing or founders or CEOs, felt supported by our team. And that was really key for us to ensure that our clients stayed with us. I was also very much part of that process, and especially, and I say I stepped away, but client service has been my number one aspect of what I was running eventually in the business. I was still very much part of managing and growing those teams, and still today, still very close to our clients and working with our clients today. It's the lifeblood, and you can step away from it, but then what? And I think for me at this stage in the business, even though we've been running for so long, my client relationships that we have are critical. And I need to be there and I need to be part of the conversation. And we need to be building up rapport with our clients at every turn. So I think that is key, is that we had a client service team that has maintained the image of the business over X amount of time. And that's always been a hiring strategy, that we've always made sure that there's client service in place.
Interesting, very interesting. And now that we're moving into the age of AI, a lot of people are skeptical when it comes to starting agencies because they feel like platforms like Lovable.dev or Midjourney or Canva or whatever AI tool that's coming out might replace the need for developers or for UI UX designers. So how are you integrating AI in your agency, and what's your thought? What are your thoughts about this whole AI?
Yeah, so we did we actually just recently in the agency we did a talk around AI and how we integrate. So it's still very early days inside of AI, and as much as the hype around it is massive, it's showing us the potential. It's not where we are today, is only the potential of where we're going, how fast we're moving. So if we look at potential and we say, right, well, this is where AI is at, and it's whether it's through prompts or transcription or whatever it may be, whatever you're using it for, it's still very early days. But the way we're looking at AI right now, obviously for our clients and everything, I'm just talking purely from the agency perspective, is how do we operationally become more efficient? And what I've done is said to the team, we really got to look at AI as, I said to him, I said, when I started, the first time a computer landed on my desk, and I got this massive box and this massive screen, and I got to tinker with it and do different things and change the startup sound and do all of these like wonderful things. When I was 14 years old, this is where AI is right now. It's a space to explore and really just like learn as much as you possibly can around it. Because once we understand it, we'll be able to be more effective in it. And I want this, and I said the word scrappy. I want to be scrappy in AI because scrappy is allowing us to play. And by play, we will learn what is a benefit and what's not benefiting us and move from there. We will never use AI, not never, that's a strong word, but we won't use AI at this stage as any creative processes unless it's for drafting, maybe, or maybe looking at thought starters, or seeing, maybe a proofreading, the very basic side of it. But human interaction is still critical for our industry because it's only going to take us so far. And we mustn't feel fearful of AI. We must embrace it by doing. But if you reject it and go, AI, like you said, lovable. I've worked on all of these applications as purely a learning thing. I've built applications, I've got them live, I've tested stuff. Yes, they're good, but you know how much more powerful you're going to be if you've got a coding knowledge and you can actually go deeper on that and actually push it to its limit. That's where we need to be. And that's why, as a designer, as a copywriter, as a developer, how can you push it to its limit? Because you've got the core skill set, whether it's coding, whether it's engineering, whether it's systems processes, and maximize it and see how far it goes. Because we need people to push it to see, right, well, this is actually flawed. This doesn't write the code right. Or I've done a thesis on a paper, but this actually isn't right. And I think we need to stop this repelling AI and embrace it, but in a playful environment, and then execute off it. So operationally for us, it works really great. It works transcripting videos, content, summarizing content, proofreading stuff. Taking the handwriting component out of taking notes in a meeting. This is very structured, and it helps us create governance across client communication or internal communication or briefing, etc. But it still needs a second R. It still needs human intervention by going, this doesn't really sound right. We need to change this, or this wasn't the direction of the meeting, so we're going to change that. This is very 101s, but I'm just highlighting to how we're using it. And then when we look at AI inside of development, there's also what happens if you need to quickly launch an MVP for a client, or you want to show a client a component that can be developed by, let's use Lovable as the example, or through Windsurf or whatever it may be, that doesn't require a week's worth of work, but you can put the concept in front of them and go, this is how it functions. This is more or less what it does. Now let's execute on it. And then we can build the actual project. So we got to use it as I've classified as a drafting platform to create faster iterative ideas that are aligned to our bigger thinking. So always put yourself first before AI and what knowledge you do have, and use it to your advantage, and then deliver on what the expectation is and use it as an operational cycle. So that's how we're doing it. I mean, and you can go deeper on this, and I love AI. It fulfills me with where we're going to, but I think it's just how we use it, and I don't think it's about being fearful. I think it's more about embracing it and trying and just testing and seeing what works, and just have a bit of fun. You're only going to get this time to have fun with AI before it becomes a mainstream tool,
Yeah.
and that's it. And then it's going to be, then it'll be get serious. And I think right now you still have an opportunity to have a bit of fun inside of it and test different things while it's still very early adopters are doing these things. So I would say have a good time, and and be playful when it comes to AI.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Darren. It's been just like that, an hour is gone. And it's just been an incredible learning curve for me personally. Also, because I'm still in the agency space. I tried so many times to shut it down and not work on that business, but something always keeps calling me back. So for me, thank you so much for this amazing, amazing lesson. Do you have any last few words that would like to share with the listeners or the watchers?
No, I just think, go out there, have a great time with what you decide to start. If you do start up something, and it's okay if it doesn't go your way. Just keep on building and learning from the things you know.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Darren. And for everyone that has been watching or listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And always remember that the truth will set you free. Thank you and see you on the next video.